Hey, everybody. Here we are again at the Sidebar podcast, and I'm so glad to again have my friends Cynthia and Danielle with us. And we're starting something new that is going to be a little bit of a trend for the next number of episodes, the Bible and fill in the blank.
Yes.
And so we're starting today with something that's pretty interesting, the Bible and Bruno Mars.
Yeah.
You guys ready?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's sort of what's going on today. We don't actually know what the other person has prepared to say.
Yes.
And so we're talking about how would the Bible approach Bruno Mars? And it's sort of, that's it. Like, that's all we have. And so it's each our own sort of individual leaning into that idea.
Yeah.
And so how'd that go? Was that fun? Was that hard? Was that...
It was interesting.
It was interesting. That's a good word. Interesting.
Yeah.
Could go either way.
It was fun. I
Okay,
mean,
good. You enjoyed it. I saw on Instagram you were doing research.
yes.
I only know that because you showed me on Instagram that
and,
you were doing
and
research.
your daughter
and my daughter commented.
replied.
Yes, that's great.
She's very excited.
So here's the deal. Who wants to go first?
Danny.
okay.
Oh, Cynthia's nominated.
All right, just put
Cynthia's
me on
in a
the spot.
nominating kind of mood today.
I am.
Well, so I took the approach of Bruno Mars's most recent album,
Oh, okay.
Silk Sonic with Anderson .Paak. I know it's kind of a favorite around here, especially the younger crowd.
Gotcha. We'll pray for them.
Well, maybe at the end of this.
Depends on what you have to say.
Yeah.
There you go.
So I kind of went into that research. The album currently is number 7 on Billboard Top 100 of 2021. As for Bruno Mars, currently holds 11 Grammy Awards, and he partners with Anderson .Paak. Don't know if you guys know who
Gotcha.
that is, but he's,
Drummer.
yes, drummer.
Extraordinaire.
I know Anderson.
Yeah. Well,
Friend of Cynthia.
well, he was.
She's not joking either, are you?
Wait, really?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay.
Well, we believed you.
Well, yes, drummer. He was in the halftime show. But what I came away with is this album promotes confidence and sensuality and being like okay with hitting on opposite gender and just like sensuality. And it's fun to listen to. I mean, Bruno even wrote, "We just want to give something to the kids to dance to." You know.
That's a song?
No, that's his quote.
That's a quote. Oh,
Yes.
gotcha.
From a
gotcha.
song.
Okay.
That's his
It
quote.
could be a song, too.
I mean, yeah, and another quote: "We're making music to make women feel good and make people dance, and that's it. I'm not gonna make people sad."
Ah,
So
Interesting.
my question is,
So would Bruno approve of the Bible and Bruno Mars podcast?
yeah, I don't know. But that's my question: is like this album promotes confidence and
Mm-hmm.
sensuality. As Christians, are we allowed to be confident beings or sensual
Interesting.
beings? I don't
Interesting.
know.
And he's combining those two things, not separating those two things.
Yeah, like they almost
Yeah, so
come
that's an
together.
important distinction.
Yeah.
Interesting. Are we allowed to combine them? That's a question you came up with.
Are we allowed to,
good.
be those beings?
Yeah.
I'd love to know your guys' take.
I mean,
Wow.
I think yes. Of course, there's always balance and boundaries. But when I think of, in a marriage or depending on what you're being sensual about and confidence, where you're getting your confidence from. So, I mean, it depends.
Yeah.
But I definitely think it's okay in the right context.
Interesting. I mean, the word sensuality sort of just has connotations already. So when you put confidence with that, it's hard to not see that going down a road that I think the Bible would speak to really, really clearly. And those words aren't necessarily popular. The Bible does use words like modesty, which that is like a bad word in this society.
Right.
The Bible does speak of things like the whole of who we are, relationally, emotionally, sexually, physically. All of those kinds of things are all important, and they're all to be holy. And so, like to find that we would find confidence in something that maybe the Bible is saying, be careful.
Yeah.
We're in a study of Revelation of all things.
Yeah.
And the amount of times Revelation talks about sexual immorality, it's like, this is Revelation. Like you wouldn't think, but it's like everywhere. But then even, and you'll see this in what I'm picking up as a song of his, it's everywhere in his music. Like one of my takeaways is that all there is to sing about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, is that all there is in the world? Like,
mean-
there's more than that. And I think confidence is a word that I would agree with you, Cynthia. In balance is probably an okay thing, but confidence in self,
Right.
versus a confidence in God. I mean, I think confidence is actually a really good translation for a biblical word, trust. Having confidence in God that he's going to come through. And so then confidence in ourselves is like, oh, I mean, I let myself down a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that like in a shaming kind of way. I'm saying that like in a self-aware kind of way, that I think maybe confidence in ourselves, to your point, Cynthia, out of line is a recipe for failure.
Yeah.
Confidence in God, he will never disappoint. That's
Absolutely.
a radically different thing. But I don't think he wants us to be down on ourselves. I think he wants us to be confident in who he's created us to be. We are made in the image of God. There is dignity for every single one of us. But that can be taken too far.
Yeah.
I would be very cautious about combining the words confidence and sensuality.
Yeah.
Apart, completely different.
Yeah.
Yes. Well,
Interesting.
I love that take. I mean, we always struggle with like, oh, Christians are supposed to be meek and they're supposed to be in the background and not exert confidence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when you derive your confidence from God,
Yep.
it's a whole different concept. Yeah.
And then people are drawn to that because when you're the light, we are all reflections of Jesus as Christians.
Right.
And I just feel like that's a good thing. People are drawn to that confidence. Like, well, where does that come from? And then that opens a conversation. Like, well, this is why.
That's really good. And then when you put a word like sensuality or a word like success or a word like whatever that's me-centered, the confidence is actually look at me, look at me, look at me.
Right.
And so now we're already at a place where it's like, oh, okay, if everybody lives that way, then nobody loves and nobody serves.
Yeah.
Everybody's always in it for their own good,
Yeah.
which that's a recipe for disaster
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. Well, you said you had
Interesting.
similar research about
I do.
it.
So we'll save the best for last. Cynthia, you go last.
Oh,
I'll
Lord.
go second. So I was trying to think through, like, what do I want to talk about? And like I said, we're in a series in Revelation. We're ending Revelation, and we're talking about heaven for 3 weeks as we end this series. And so I was like, I wonder if Bruno talks about heaven. He's got a song called, I didn't know that was the title of the song, but it's called Locked Out of Heaven.
Yep.
And I thought, well, that's interesting. And this is a song that got tons of play on the radio and all over the place. So this is a really popular song. I didn't necessarily know what the verses said. I knew what the chorus, pre-chorus said. But the verse, check this out. First verse, never had much faith in love or miracles. I mean, what does that tell you from the get-go? I don't have faith in these things that we would say biblically you have faith in. Like, that's what faith is,
Right.
Love and miracles. Never want to put my heart on the line. So how do you live that way? I'm not going to put my heart on the line.
Right.
But swimming in your waters, something spiritual. So now take your word sensuality, and he's equating it with
Right.
spiritual.
Yeah.
And then I'm born again every time you spend the night. Like, born again, where else do you get that language except for from Scripture itself?
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's like, well, the metaphor, the irony even of, like, he's taking these two concepts, and he's sort of equating spirituality, sexuality, sensuality. The pre-chorus, because your sex takes me to paradise. Your sex takes me to paradise. Like, he's not bashful. You got to say, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know what the guy stands for because every song has a similar feeling.
Right.
But then the chorus is, because you make me feel like I've been locked out of heaven for too long. You make me feel like I've been locked out of heaven. They think this is probably about a specific person that he's felt like sort of shut off from. No. But the very concept, you make me feel like I've been locked out of heaven. And one of the things that we're talking about heaven, biblically, is that God is making it accessible.
Right.
And through Jesus, heaven is accessible, not just way off in eternity, right here, right now.
Yeah.
Jesus says in John 10:10, I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. That Jesus wants us to have the fullness of life, and that's both now and for eternity. It's actually the exact opposite of being locked out of heaven.
Right.
Jesus came to open up the doors of heaven. So I'm like, that's so interesting. And yet Bruno hits on this idea that it's even in the Bible in actually really interesting ways. Ecclesiastes chapter 8. This is Solomon. So Solomon is known to be the richest, wisest king, sort of whoever lived at that time. And this is what he writes in Ecclesiastes. So I commend the enjoyment of life, because there is nothing better for a person under the sun than to eat, drink, and be glad. So eat, drink, and be merry sort of became like, for many, centuries actually, like YOLO.
Yeah.
Like, it became like you only live once, so like do whatever. Eat, drink, and be merry. Here's the crazy thing. Solomon is saying that's actually okay, to your word, Cynthia, in the proper boundaries and the proper guardrails. What the Bible is actually saying is there's good things in eating and drinking. There's good things in sex in its context and in the proper place. The Bible's not against these things. These are all good things in the right condition. But it's not hard to say food out of control in our life, that's a problem. Yeah. There's addictions, gluttony. Yeah. There's disorders, anorexia, bulimia, that spawn from food out of control in our life. Drinking out of control in our life leads to alcoholism, addiction, deep struggles. Sex out of control in our lives. I literally wrote this word down. We live only for what's sensual. And that's what Bruno is saying a lot of times. What we know about whether it's any kind of sex out of control, but pornography specifically, it rewires our brain. If we're not careful, repetition, it complicates the ways that relationship goes. And so the Bible wants something like sex to be rooted and sensuality only in marriage, and the husband and wife are able to enjoy these things. Yes. So in the proper context, they're great. Out of the context, they're dangerous. Yeah. But the crazy thing is you can put great rhythm, cool beat, amazing musicians and artists, and our guard is let down to things that maybe in other cases our guard is up. Yeah. And, we can say, I'm just making music for the kids to dance to. But there's a message behind the music. Yeah. That I would say, hey, we got to be careful of that. Because at the end of the day, if that's the way we're living, enough is never enough. There's always a search for more, but this has always been the case. Go way back, not way back, but go back, and the Rolling Stones would say, "I can't get no satisfaction," and they put that in the context of a relationship with a woman. U2 would say, "I still haven't found what I'm looking for." Been this longing, looking for more, and what we would say to a Bruno from the Bible is Jesus is the one who satisfies. God is the one who is able to meet the deepest longings of our life. That's why he uses analogies like, for those who are thirsty, come and drink from the water of life. Those who are hungry, come because Jesus is the bread of life, the one who meets our deepest needs. And so all of these other things and the search for them is a distraction. Here's what's crazy. I forgot to say this. Solomon is like the original Bruno Mars. Oh, yeah. And so Solomon is such a playboy. He makes Bruno look like a nobody. 1 Kings 11 says Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines. Take that, Bruno.
Yeah, I was going to say.
But here's what's amazing.
That's complicated.
At the end of the day, Solomon's, it's like all of that stuff is vanity. All of that stuff is meaningless if you don't have God in the right place in your life. Yeah. And so I think that's maybe one thing the Bible would say to Bruno Mars. Yeah. Yes. Questions, comments, thoughts, follow-up before Cynthia just unloads on us?
That's funny because I was going to pick that song. Because I was like, it goes with, the Heaven series that we're doing. And I was like, I feel like somebody else is going to pick it. And so I switched.
I went for the obvious. I'm Captain Obvious all the time.
No, I agree, though. You made some really good points in there, especially about the sensuality. And I feel like you guys the conversation is very similar. Yeah. But yeah, just everything in balance. And I feel like being sensual is for marriage. And when you think of the word sensual, it's regarding all the senses, like taste, smell, visual, all the things. And granted, just take this out the podcast if I'm saying too much. But when
Is this PG? PG-13? Where are we?
But when I think about sensuality in a marriage, I'm like, okay, first I have to have great food because and I feel like this is the things that Bruno sings about, like food. And I feel like we were talking about this the other day. Yeah. Food, sex, and drinking. Yep.
And again and again, yeah.
Yes. And then when you think about a great date, at least with me and my husband, it has to have great food, atmosphere, aromatherapy. My senses smell it. I need either sage, candles, something. And then, intimacy.
Too much information.
I'm going to put in the notes. Must have.
Our goal has been to get a snort, so there's our first one of the Sidebar podcast.
I'm just saying,
But you're
in marriage,
right.
No,
The-
yeah.
God
okay.
has created us with senses.
Yeah.
yes.
So those are not bad things.
Right.
Those are gifts that we've been given. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're not picking on Bruno.
Right.
He's just representative of the culture where it's saturated.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, I mean, just watch a commercial. You can't sell, I don't know, a watch.
Right.
You can't sell like the most mundane kind of a thing through advertising without going in that direction.
Right.
Yeah.
And so
It's the old saying of
yeah.
sex sells.
Yeah, absolutely.
For
absolutely.
sure.
All right, Cynthia.
You're up.
All right. So my song is Grenade.
Okay.
And it was really popular.
Yeah.
I looked
You
up
went back. You went
what
back
are
a little
his
further.
but it's still up there
Yeah.
because I googled. I said, well, what are Bruno Mars's most popular songs?
Gotcha.
And I think this popped up like number 3 or number 4, and I was like, cool, great. And so Grenade is, when you listen to it, it sounds like it's talking about a selfless love, like he has for this person. But then when you begin to really listen to the lyrics, I was like, it actually sounds more toxic and harmful than selflessness. So everything he mentions when he's explaining his love for this person, it causes harm to himself. So it's catch a grenade, put my hand in a blade, jump in front of a train,
Yeah.
and then eventually he says, I'd die for you.
Yeah.
And then when you listen to the verses, he's explaining this woman's character traits or however she behaves towards
Yeah.
him, and everything is bad.
You're like, what kind of relationship are you in that you need to jump in front of a train, stick your hand in a blade, and
What's
catch a
going on?
grenade?
I think there's a bigger issue.
What is going on? But then when you explain her in the verse, she sounds like a terrible person. So why would you want to do
Yeah.
all that stuff for them?
Oh, that's interesting. It's a vicious cycle relationship. there.
Yeah. And so I was like, wait. So my first thinking was, when you think about culture and what the Bible have to say, sometimes themes are similar, but often they differ in how they go about them or the motive behind it. So when you think about selfless love, completely biblical. Just think about 1 Corinthians 13:6. It talks about love does not delight in evil, but rejoices in truth. And we all know 1 Corinthians 13:6. But how does this type of love differ from what God is describing in 1 Corinthians? Because this sounds like a more, I got to put myself in harm's way
Right,
type of love versus what Corinthians is
That's
saying.
interesting, yeah. The first thing that popped in my head, now this may be weird, 21 Pilots has a song about, they have a lyric like, take a bullet for you, but I don't see any bullets coming through. It's like, I'll catch a grenade for you, but I don't see any grenades.
Right,
So like in a marriage, it's like, oh yeah, that's great. You'll take a grenade for me. Will you just wash the dishes?
right.
And it's like, we think we're going to do these massive acts of sacrificial love, but we don't even do the small ones.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we don't do the small ones, then how would we ever suppose we would jump to the big ones?
For sure.
So, I think that like hypothetical nature of it is like, yeah, that sounds great and it's cool and catchy and we would hope the hero in all of us rises up and does that. And it's like, yeah, but the character of your daily life,
Yeah.
not modeling that out. Jesus says, greater love has no one than this. You lay your life down for your friends. So that's like a foundational part of being a friend is, you don't get a good friend without there being sacrifice involved.
Right.
And it's
Yeah.
a two-way street. And so when you hear something like this that has an element that feels, that may be toxic because where's the joy? Where's the hope? Where's the peace? Where's the mutual submission and the care and the concern? It's just like, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. We need to pray for Bruno.
But what's great, there's a line that says, and I didn't even write this down, but all I'm asking you is just to give me all of your love. I was like, that's actually
that's
all
it,
I'm
Cynthia.
asking. I was like, that's actually really huge.
Yeah, that's all.
That's all. Just give me all of your
everything.
love.
And I'll take a grenade for you if you do it. So,
Right? Doesn't it sound a little bit like?
well, I think we all know somebody that's in that kind of toxic relationship. You're like, oh my gosh. If they're dating, at least, you're like, leave. Like,
Yeah.
this is not healthy. You keep turning back and going back to it, but you get hurt every single time.
Yeah.
And I think we talked 2 weeks ago, and it was like, I think you had said, if it's not working out and dating and they're cheating, run. Like,
It's not going to magically get better.
Right.
Yeah.
That is
So.
for sure.
And then my second thought, and then I'm done, is actually, and I always say this word wrong, it actually sounds a little bit like, is it unrequited love? I think that's how you pronounce it. And so I read this article, and it says, although unrequited love gets a bad rap, it can actually be thrilling and addictive, even when it's emotionally painful to want someone who is out of reach or who doesn't respond to you. Unrequited love can heighten your sense of self through the painful dramas it creates. I was like, what
So
on
stalking is a good thing?
I was like, people go after pain to make themselves feel.
It's like the you want what you can't have kind of look
Yeah.
at love.
And
it's
so-
like,
Yeah.
But when you listen to this song, it's like he knows that she doesn't love him, but you'll still do anything for her. And she's constantly hurting you, and you're constantly hurting yourself.
Yeah.
But why?
Yeah.
You know?
That sounds like, when we talk about the Bible to Bruno, it almost sounds like, hey, have some dignity.
Yeah.
Have some understanding. Whoa. You're created in the image of God. You don't have to act that way, expect that to happen, anticipate that. Like, you need to take some, I would say pride, that in the sense of who God created you to be. You're better than that. You've been created for more than that. So, like, don't lower your standards to this, I need to stick my hand in a blade.
Right.
Raise your standard to say, as I seek to be the kind of person that, like, is sort of, the God's best version of me, then I'm going to look for somebody who's also seeking to strive to be that as well.
Right.
And so, this Bruno idea somehow seems like the to aim for the lowest level of a relationship, momentary pleasure, passing moments that just become enough is not enough. Like, you don't just catch a grenade, you jump in front of a train. You don't just have to do one song about confidence and sensuality. That's every song is about that, and it feels like, oh, that's the theme of your, like, that's the theme of your music. I'm not saying your life, I don't know his life, but like, that's the message you're known for. Like, okay, like, I get to be known for the great musicianship, great artistry, like that part, and he's all of those kind of things, like, makes good music from that standpoint. But you're known for your message also. It's like, come on, man, you can do better than this. There's a part of me that wants to say that. What if you leveraged it for, like, good, and to call people to something honorable?
Because most Bruno Mars songs I've heard from children, and they don't know what they're singing.
Totally,
And
that's a whole other thing.
And then I go look up the lyrics. I'm like, you were just singing that?
you should not be singing that.
Does your mom
Okay,
know
so
that
I'll
you're
date
listening to that?
myself. I'll date myself. There was this Cosby episode. What was the youngest daughter's name? Rudy?
Rudy.
Rudy was singing this
All
song
night
all
long.
night long. Look, that's the song. She's singing all night long, and I just remember Dad. Can we say his name? Dad stops, and he's like, "Do you know what you're singing?" And she was like, "Yeah, like reading, doing homework all night long." And he's like, "Oh, okay, keep singing the song." And like
That's
that's
what
our
you think.
modern version of, like,
Yes.
this pumped in the sort of, it's the background music of a generation's life.
Yep.
So let's not pretend that they're not getting the message.
Yeah, for sure.
That they're not being shaped by it, being formed by it.
Yeah.
When it's all around them.
Yep.
So we still agree that Bruno's great at making music. We just
Yeah.
can't be shaped by it.
There you go. That's a
Yeah.
good distinction.
Well,
Only shaped by the Bible.
yes, like that. Well, thank you for bringing your Bruno Mars knowledge to the table.
It was fun being surprised.
It
So
was.
Yeah, that was fun.
Good
It was
thoughts.
also cool how we all kind of related in a weird
Right.
way.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this was great. Next week we have the Bible and the Bachelor.
Oh, goodness
wow.
gracious.
Gotta go watch.
I don't know
what,
how much
20
research I'll be doing on that one.
25 seasons. of
25
that?
seasons.
I've
Oh,
never
clear
seen
your
it.
schedule. You've
Perfect.
never seen it. Good.
No.
I'm not far behind you, but we won't be short on opinions.
I
though.
host gatherings at my apartment, so I might be the expert there.
So
But
that's good. Cynthia and I will judge you the whole time.
perfect. That's what we're
1000%.
doing in these. Well, thank you so much for joining us this week, and we hope you turn in next week.